Let's see how we can go about making this audio waveform. I'm going to start with a good old 2-point polychain. So create a box, select these two, delete and F2. I'm going to squash it down a little bit, but not all the way down, just a little bit like that. We can do that squashing down in layout. So in usual non-committal style, I am just going to OD copy paste that. So I'm just going to go for copy to external, F12 to bring up layout, and then paste. It's a shame we can't rename at this point. We have to do that if we save. Anyway, items, clone, and we'll go to clone instance. Now I can tell you straight away that if I now turn on VPR, I'm going to get a crash. And I'm pretty confident. Oh, yeah, there we go. Blah, blah, blah. So F12 to launch layout again. And then OD paste. Option C, which is the same as this clone instance. The thing to do to get around this problem is I'm going to select the environment light and I'm going to delete it. And then what do you know? No crashes. I think we can add an environment light later on. It's just for some reason you didn't like it. We'll sort the instances out, but let's first turn off this original copy. Let's open the instance generator for that. Lovely. One on the keyboard. We're going to go for a rectangular array. We'll just go along the X here. So let's take these down. And just for scale, let's turn on VPR. Press P to bring up the properties, and on the original, we're going to go over to the Edges tab and we're going to give it a minus number to give it some volume. There we go. So we could probably bring these in closer. Or perhaps increase the instances. That's a lot. Let's take it down a little bit. So what do we know about this? Firstly, stretching is, let's turn that to uniform. And we know no stretching is 0%. And minus 100, it turns it off. So that's good to know. So if we go to minus 99, we can effectively see dots. In fact, let's, on the surface editor, let's give it an emission so we don't have to worry about lighting. There we go, so full on white and one on there. And let's turn the light off because we're not using it. Okay. So minus 99 is basically a dot, and minus 100 or minus 1 will be turning them off. So that's good to know. Okay, we'll leave this stretch at uniform and we'll go into the nodes. Oh, look at that, modelers. If you click on Finder, do something elsewhere in another app, click back in layout, modeler crashes. You try and tell a developer to go and have a cup of tea for 5 minutes, come back and click on modeler and watch it crash. Anyway, let's go for a good old turbulence node. Turbulence, there we go, turbulence. And I'm going to simply connect the color to the stretch. And already we can see a little bit of movement. Foreground color, let's just make this white so it's maximum. So it's 100% effectively. And we'll also get a multiply node, math, multiply. And to see this a bit better, we're going to pump that up. That's excellent. We're almost there really, aren't we? So turbulence. We can play around with the scale of stuff. In fact, what I'm going to do is let's create a new null. rather than animate stuff in here, let's go to 25 frames. Let's move that 2 meters down the Z. So you can see what's going on. There it is. F2, post behavior linear. Okay, so that's a constant movement. And where it says reference, where it says reference object, we can point that to the reference. There we go, and we should see movement. Good. If we play around with the scale of the Z or the Y, or we could even speed up the reference null or slow it down. Anyway, between that little lot, we'll get a result that we're happy with. So that's good, but I'm going to need to remap, I think. So if we let's put in a contrast of 80. Okay, so this is the original size of the 2-point polychain at 0%. Let's just quickly try the scalar at -1. We'll put that in the background color. Has that done it? Let's turn on VPR and have a look. Yeah, I think it kind of has, although at -1, as we found earlier, you'd expect it to disappear. Anyway, I don't want to do it like that. Let's delete that, and let's instead get a remap node. Remap, here we go. So let's take the result into the input, and then that result into stretch. Again, we've got our original dimensions here. 0 to 1. Let's go -1 to 0. And as you can see, we've squashed out some of those points to nothing, but I want to see something. So let's go really small. And there we have them. They're all back. So if that's what you want, that's what you have to do. Let's take the contrast back. That's pretty nice, and because we're just stretching 2-point polychains, we're getting a nice consistent rounding of the edges each time. If we want something modelled, we'll look into that next. But for now, this is good. The only thing I want to do now is taper up and down, so it starts at less at the bottom end, tapers up, and then tapers back down again. So let's move all that out of the way, and I want, actually I'm going for Db&w's channel blender because it's great and it's easier to read. You could just use the native Vector Scalar, but you'll need 3 of them and it just gets into a mess, but this is perfect for what I need. So base position of each of those instances into this vector. I'm going to get a graph. No, I'm not. I'm going to get a gradient. And rather than use the X, which would mean sort of handling lots of keyframes for that end and that end, which might be what you want for independent look, I'm going to use the length. So you could imagine like a circle around this from the origin point of the object. That's kind of a length. It basically means we use less keyframes. In this instance, let's just do it anyway. So color into the stretch. Okay, that gives us that. In fact, now let's get the color into the remapped version. Okay, so we've got little dots here. So it's 1 meter scale here. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know, something like 12. So that's at 0. So I want to key there at 0. And then here, let's say 1. Okay. We can play with the curve because we want that to look. So that's basically just 0 to 1. And then let's just get let's just multiply these two together and we should get a nice taper. Here we go. Pretty cool. Let's open this gradient. Perhaps we want those ends to be a bit flatter. A bit more of a fall off. And that works quite nicely. Actually, it's worth mentioning as well, Db&w have, as part of their Patreon account, they have an audio frequency node. So if you have a specific piece of audio you want this to marry up to, load up your audio file and take it from there. So that's all good. Actually, just out of interest, while we're here, in the name of tinkering, we're set to rectangular array. Let's just play with a radial array. Perhaps rotation we could item. Is that where the rim? The rim doesn't work. But if we, how about if we target item? Look at target itself. No, that doesn't work either. So there's a few restrictions, it would appear, with 2-point polys, but you can pretty much attach them to any of this little lot. Let's take us back to rectangular array. There we go. So I've set it up as an emission. As you can see, it could be obviously absolutely anything. Let's just keep it simple for now. Perhaps we'll add a gradient over that. What we could also do is get a spot instance. You see this scale? Let's get another gradient. I'm scaling on all 3 axes, aren't I? So I just need to plug that into there and it will take the X value of that. And let's just plug that into there. So we've got black and we'll have white. Okay, but we'll put this on stepped. There should be a point at which we just isolate like the higher numbers. There we go, a bit like that. So we could have it stepped like that, or we could have a slight gradient it out a bit. Is that a word? Fade it in, fade it out. Okay, so that's quite nicely isolated. So if we now multiply those together, in fact, let's try a mixer. Mixer, is it that one? And we'll use, there's a bit of guesswork. Okay, so that's our foreground. So this is our background. And if we multiply them on top of each other, no, it's always getting backwards. Screen them on top of each other. Perhaps we don't need a gradient on there at all. Perhaps we just need something entirely different. So we've done that with instances. Let's see what that would look like with actual modelled geometry. So let's keep it really simple. There's a little box here. I'll tell you what, let's just do an array quickly. I think LightWave CAD is pretty good for that. It's going to modify and we shall go for, where is it? Clone array, top. There we go, a simple array of 10 by 10. I'm going to take that source. Let's take that source and delete it. And F2, so they're all nicely packed into the center there. As before, let's just copy and paste using OD copy paste. And paste. There we go. In the previous example, we were using instances, but they were being stretched. So if we tried that on these boxes, obviously the top end would stretch, and we don't want that. Besides which, you might have some sort of bespoke model you just want to distort. As before, I'm going to create a reference null, and then 25 frames, I'm just going to move it down to Z like that, F2, linear, and we're going to use that as our texture displacement reference. Select our boxes, P for properties, let's delete all of these, and we need a nodal displacement. I'm going to use the native displacement for this, although the setup I think is pretty similar for the DP kit version. First thing I'm going to do is go to the displacement, and because I'm using the native displacements, I'm going to change the mode to set. So under the displacement, we're just going to move up and down, so that is transform. In fact, what will be even easier is we just use translate. Okay, cool. So we plug the deformed into the input. I'm going to get a Db&w channel blender node and take the object position into the vector. Now, object position I think used to be called spot info. World position is world spot info, and current position is spot info, but in its current deformed state. I think that's correct anyway. So I just want it in its base form here, so I'm going to get a logic node next. We're displacing along the Y. Take the Y into logic A, copy and paste this channel blender, so we've got another one of those. Just tidy that up. Let's take the logic out into our Y and then vector into the translation. So that's all at 0, 0, 0. And what we're going to say in the logic node, if these points are above 0, so if A is greater than B, move to position 1, which you kind of see, or 2, or 20, or whatever you like. So that's done exactly what we want. That's pretty easy to understand. All we need to do really is change this value with a texture. Let's get a procedural node. Take a look here, it's set to turbulence, but obviously nice thing about LightWave is it has plenty of procedural textures to choose from. So much so, I'm just going to leave it on turbulence. Let's just close that down for a second. I'm going to take the value, I'm going to plug that into the true. As you can see, it has done something, not quite what we're after. While we're in the procedural node, let's reference that null there. So increase the foreground with perhaps even a bit more. It's interesting, but it's not what we want. What we need to do is move this position here into the center of each of the parts, which means a little bit of spot subtraction. Get a mesh part node. So there's our mesh part. We also need a subtraction node, and we need the vector version of that. So we're going to take the object spot of each of those minus the center position of each of these, and the result will go into the position. Now we have some nicely deformed pins. So obviously we can go back into our texture. Perhaps we want a bit bigger. Play with the scales as before. And then work your way through some of these textures and see what flavor you prefer. And the nice thing about this, if we just pop back to Modeler for a second, let's take one of these. Keep into LightWave CAD, let's go for the line tool so we can just draw out some boxes here. So that's our path. Remove that. Let's just do an OD copy paste again. Copy, back to layout. Let's go paste. Let's move it back a bit. Let's go to the first version. Let's copy. Let's go to here. Paste. Now you notice it's jumped back. Should you run into this issue, double click on the node displacement, and under displacement, set it to local coordinates. Here we go, another brain dump for hopefully for my future self. Should LightWave get a second coming? Anyway, I hope it was of use to somebody.